Hey everyone, Pastor Mike here with Time of Grace. We are walking through the Apostle Paul's letters to first century churches, and today we come to the book of Philippians. If you remember our last video, the Apostle Paul had been put under house arrest for a crime he didn't commit, but God used that time in great ways. Paul wrote the book of Ephesians and Philippians and Colossians and Philemon, and today we come to that second book, Philippians. If you've heard anything about the book of Philippians, it's probably this: that it's a book bursting with joy. Tons of famous, like Pinterest, Hallmark verses come from the book of Philippians. The peace that goes beyond understanding. I can do everything through Christ who gives me strength. I've learned the secret of being content. Rejoice in the Lord always. Think about things that are true and beautiful and noble. Think about God. That's all in the book of Philippians, which is kind of shocking when you think about the situation. Paul wrote about that peace, that joy, that contentment when he was in jail. And you should know, as you're about to read the book, that while he was in jail, life was not perfect. There were some preachers that tried to take Paul's place, and they did not love people well. They were in it for themselves, out of selfish ambition, Paul says. And then there were people in the church that Paul cared about, who were fighting, who were being proud, who were butting heads, who would not humble themselves and express the unity that God wanted them to have. And so Paul picks up his pen and he writes this moving book that's about humility and love and joy in Jesus. He expresses that his greatest joy is not in a perfect life, but in the fact that he has perfect love from a perfect God. And I want you to apply that to your situation too. Now, it's easy to look at the stuff that's going on in life. These people aren't getting along. My kids are fighting. Stuff's crazy at work. People have bad intentions. I'm suffering. I'm not where I want to be. But Paul refused to put something as important as his joy in something as uncertain as his life circumstances. Instead, he simply knew this, that because of Jesus, God is near. He said, I want to know Christ and the power of his resurrection. I want to be close to Jesus, even if it means that I have to suffer. Paul found his greatest joy in the presence of God, a presence that was all his because of what Jesus has done. And you can too. Your joy doesn't have to wait until that gets fixed or that relationship gets mended. Instead, through Jesus, you can remember that God is here. He's with you. And friends, that is the secret to being content and to be able to repeat with the Apostle Paul, I can do anything and everything through Jesus who gives me strength. Now, the second thing I want you to see in the book of Philippians comes in chapter 2. Paul's going to talk about this tension that was happening between some members of his church. And he's going to have to encourage them to be humble and kind and selfless, to think not just of themselves, but of one another. And you know how he's going to motivate them to do it? Through Jesus. Remember our last video in the book of Ephesians where we talked about the map and the gas in the tank? Living a good life, doing good works is like this map that we should follow as Christians, but we need a lot of Jesus to be able to do it. Paul does it again in Philippians 2. He gives them the map. He says, here's how I want you to live. Be selfless. Don't think of your own needs. Think of the needs of others. And then he reminds them of Jesus. The Jesus who is humble. The Jesus who is selfless. The Jesus who was, by his very nature, God. But he didn't think about who he was, but about what we needed. And so he humbled himself even to death, even death on a cross. That's why Jesus is exalted and glorious and good. And maybe that's a good word for you. Maybe there's some tension with someone in your life. Maybe you're not getting along with your husband, your wife, your kids, your coworkers, or someone at your church. But I'd encourage you then, as Paul did, to fix your eyes on Jesus. Think of his love for you when you were enemies. Think of the humility that it took for him to go to a cross. And think of how beautiful it is because Jesus humbled himself. Have that same mindset. Have that same attitude. Let your faith in Jesus express itself in love that is humble like Jesus. I pray that you can rejoice and find peace in the book of Philippians. Enjoy all 4 chapters and have an amazing day.